I don't think we'll have an expansion to Baldur's Gate 3, at least one that follows the events of the main game. Sven Vinke was actually interviewed about this very question recently, and his explanation is fairly reasonable. In this article by The PC Gamer, Sven reported that at the time of the interview, 7th of August 2023, the studio had not started on any DLC and had no plans at the time. He was quoted as saying that a DLC expansion would be very hard to balance between the levels of 12 and 20. In the current base game of Baldur's Gate 3, we can only go up to level 12, but Sven will explain in this article why going above level 12 can be quite difficult. The article gives a few examples of spells that we'd gain access to if we were to go above level 12. Let's start off with Astral Projection, a spell that allows you to traverse the astral plane itself. Or how about Foresight, a spell that gives you the ability to literally see into the future, giving yourself advantage on rolls, whilst enemies gain disadvantage against you. And of course, the king of all spells, Wish. The spell is so powerful that it can bend the fabric of reality itself. In the tabletop game, you can technically wish for anything, given that your DM agrees to it. And so long as you word things correctly, mishaps do occur from time to time, then it can be granted. As you can see, these spells are game-breaking, and Larian would need to spend a lot of resources trying to balance these spells for players. Of course, they could just omit the spells entirely, but that would 1. Take away some of the magic of high-level D&D, and 2. It might mean that higher-level encounters need to be scaled back in difficulty to accommodate for the weakened spell lists of casters. Another reason why a direct sequel expansion would also be difficult is because of the fact that Baldur's Gate 3 has multiple endings. The studio would need to take account of all the different permutations and combinations of events that lead to the different endings of the game and formulate a story that's cohesive for all. As you can see, this is quite the monumental task. Sven ended the interview with a very open-ended statement. "We'll see where it lands. I've learned in the past that you need to be careful announcing things before they're ready, because sometimes you have to cancel them because they don't work out. We could work on an expansion and it could be boring, and then we should stop working on it. Because if we continue on something that's boring, we would then have to sell it to you. And then we'd have to say, here's a boring thing, and we want you to buy it. That would not be cool. So, we have to have the freedom to experiment and do our stuff. And then when we're ready to announce it, we will." So as we can see, this was a very smart response by Sven to not give any false hope to consumers, whilst also keeping the door open for any future DLC. It's this consumer-focused approach which I feel garnered a lot of success for the studio when it came to Baldur's Gate 3. One look at the Steam charts will show you just how popular the studio and this game have become amongst gamers. However, let's take a quick step back and look at history for just a moment. Baldur's Gate 2, the predecessor to BG3, notably did have expansions, and although it didn't have a level cap per se, as it was based on experience points, it would have roughly translated to level 30 plus by the end of the second expansion. Notably at this time as well, other games including Neverwinter Nights also utilized some of the higher level spells, although their scope was limited somewhat, and both Neverwinter Nights and Baldur's Gate 2 were based on an older version of D&D. I think what would make it difficult for Larian to do the same is because of their pledge to authentically translate the tabletop game to a video game setting, and omitting and altering certain spells would take away some of that magic. Having said all that, DLC does not necessarily need to increase the level cap or give access to higher level spells. Some other prominent CRPGs have also included alternate expansions for their games which doesn't affect the level cap. Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, which is one of my favorite games, included 2 story expansions, The Beast of Winter and The Forgotten Sanctum. Both these expansions added loot, story content, and new areas to explore, but notably did not raise the level cap or give access to new spells. Obsidian even added a third expansion called Seeker Slayer Survivor, which provided a purely combat-oriented, gauntlet-style arena to test your tactical might. However, why should they even continue the story of Tav and his companions at all? The Pathfinder games have included DLCs that tell separate stories within the same universe involving different characters. As a longtime D&D player myself, I gain a lot of joy from creating new characters, exploring new worlds, and telling new stories with my friends at the table. Larian could take the same approach and tell a new, perhaps shorter story within the world of Faerun. A one-shot, for example, running before, during, or even after the events of Baldur's Gate 3. It might be nice to start players at a higher level so that they gain access to those enjoyable spells and class features that we've become accustomed to. Either way, a traditional expansion to the story as a continuation from the Baldur's Gate 3 endings will be nigh on impossible given the current limitations that we have discussed. However, alternate style DLC might still be an option. It seems that Sven himself is also aware that the DLC doesn't have to take place after the events of Baldur's Gate 3, and he mentioned that in a recent interview on the Dungeons & Dragons YouTube channel. He says, well, you could do things differently in the DLC, so it doesn't have to necessarily be at the end of the game. There's different ways you can do that. So it seems that there is possibly some hope that there might be some discussions about DLCs in the works. In an interview at the end of August, Tom Butler, a senior product manager at Larian Studios, was quoted as saying that they are quite keen to make further content for Baldur's Gate 3, but aren't sure what form that would take. He is quoted as saying, "We'll carry on patching for a while, and then we're all going to take a holiday, and then we'll figure out what to do next. But at the moment, we're genuinely having discussions. We want to do more. We don't know what yet." Patch 3 has hit Faerun recently and adds a ton of new features for players to enjoy, including the fabled magic mirror, which finally allows you to change your appearance mid-playthrough. So I guess there are still some things Larian can do to spice up the game in its current state. With regards to the future of the game, it seems only time will tell. I for one will be happy regardless of whether we have DLC for the game or not. Larian have treated us to a masterpiece, and if they feel that DLC would be too complicated to execute, I would rather they work on a new project to stun us in the coming years. Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts or ideas regarding DLC for Baldur's Gate 3, leave it in the comments below. Who knows, Larian might even stumble across some of your suggestions. And of course, the obligatory YouTuber nonsense. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I really do appreciate your support. I'm sorry I've been away for a while. But I'll be making more content, and I hope to have some support from you guys in the future. Until next time.